Ladies, we are almost done. And I think I'm going to be really sad when our time together is finished. But even in the short time that we have been together, I have already heard so many good things from so many of you about how much progress you're making in this area of your marriage. And I want to encourage you by telling you that God is not looking for perfect people to use. I think we all know that because we all know perfect people don't exist. But I think sometimes I've believed the lie that God wants to use people who are farther along than I am. Maybe they're farther along in just life in general, or in age, or maturity, or spiritual maturity, or even in their marriage. But God wants to use you to come alongside other people no matter where you are. He doesn't want you to believe that lie that he wants to use somebody who's farther along than you, because the truth is, God wants to use people who are growing. That's really his biggest requirement, is growth. And whether you're new in your faith or you've been a Christian all of your life, God is simply looking for people who are moving. So if you're going from A to B, that's great. Or if you're going from S to T, that's great. The whole point is, don't stop growing. Don't stop changing. And I hope that this journey of becoming Mrs. Betterhalf isn't one that's going to end when our time together is over, but it's going to be a continued journey of just continued growth, and then allowing God to use you to share with others the things that you're learning. Okay? And today we have another challenge, another area that we can all grow in. We're going to talk about the number one thing that couples argue about: money. Okay? Why do couples argue about money so much? I think that it's not really necessarily about how much money you have, but I think the reason that we argue about money so much is because making money work inside of a marriage takes a lot of teamwork. It's all about defining my priorities, understanding his priorities, and realizing that most of the time, what's important to him, especially in the area of money, isn't necessarily important to me, and what's important to me isn't necessarily important to him, and figuring out, how do we make this thing work? What's the solution? And I think the lie that we believe is, well, if we just had a little bit more money, then we wouldn't fight about money so much. If that were true, then wealthy people would never get divorced, Right. That's not true. You have to remember, last week, we have to get to the heart of what we're arguing about. See, we're building. So last week we talked about arguing and how do we get down to the root. This week, we're talking about money and figuring out, what is it about money that we fight about? It has nothing to do with how much, and everything to do with your unity. It's only when you and your spouse learn to function as one unit, one flesh, one spirit. Remember our verse, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in mind. That's when the arguments about money become fewer and farther between. So we're going to break this down today. We're going to talk about a couple different areas, but I want to start off by establishing the context of a man, how he comes at this area of finances. Did you know that at the core of a man's identity is this need to provide, okay? Even if he's not the primary source of income in your home. It all goes back to even just think about prehistoric caveman, how he goes out and he hunts and he kills and he protects so that his family can survive. It gives a man a sense of power, of control, but really a sense of worth to his family when he's providing. Now, please do not hear me saying that a woman's work is not significant, okay? Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, men should be the primary breadwinners and women should be home, barefoot, and pregnant, and submitting to every idea that he comes up with. That's ridiculous, okay? Even in prehistoric times, it was the man and the woman working together. Right. They were both doing equally difficult work. They were just doing different things because they have different priorities. The man is out hunting and protecting and building and shelter and providing those things for his family, and the woman is gathering and she's providing clothing and food and that nurturing environment for her family. A man and a woman's job, neither is more important than the other, but you have to understand in the area of finances, a man at his core, it's so important for him to feel like he's providing for you and for his family. It's essential to who he is. I love how Shanti Feldhahn puts it in her book, For Women Only. She says, providing for those he loves is not just about making a living. In a unique way, it is an enormous part of who he is, okay? So this idea of a man's need to provide, it took me a while to understand this. When we first got married, I was really young. I barely had finished college. Literally weeks after I finished college, we got married. And I was a first-year teacher, and my husband was a traveling preacher. And my mentality in the area of finances was, cool, all our bills are paid, let's go shopping and out to dinner with the rest. And my husband was like, I don't think so. That's not, because providing for a man is about so much more than just making sure that the bills get paid every month, okay? He wants to provide, obviously, he wants to provide for the immediate needs of his family, for the bills to be paid on time, okay? But he also wants to provide security for our future as a family. And that might entail savings, having an emergency fund, having a retirement account, having college funds for our kids. He wants to provide that sense of security for the future for our family. But also, he wants to provide for my general happiness, okay? I'm going to cover that one at the end because there's a lot that needs to be said about that. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and I didn't really understand why my husband felt the need to provide for my general happiness. But we're going to cover that one at the end. So now we've established the context of how important it is for your man to feel like he's providing. But I want to shift a little bit and talk about how it's important to understand your personality and his personality. Just like we talked about last week, you have to know who you are. You have to know who he is. Remember, we talked about shouters, pouters, and stuffers. This week, it's the same thing. Know who you are in the area of finances. And generally, there are two categories, okay? We have spenders and we have savers, okay? Doesn't really require a whole lot of explanation or really even a whole lot of thought. It's pretty self-explanatory. Some people like to enjoy their money and they don't really worry about necessarily when more will be coming in. And other people are much more careful and they place a really high value on saving and planning and preparing for the future. But it's a spectrum, okay? We got the spenders and we have the savers, and we're not all, on one extreme or the other. Everyone falls kind of somewhere along that line, some of us more extreme than others. But it's something that is ingrained in you very early on. I can see it in my kids. My middle son, Graham, he's more of a spender. He likes to enjoy life. He doesn't overanalyze a purchase. If we're out, his favorite place is Dick's Sporting Goods. If we're out, inevitably he's going to find something that he really needs in Dick's Sporting Goods. And I can't have the leverage over him of figuring out, as a mom, sometimes you're like, well, do you want to pay for this with your own money to see how bad they really want it? With him, he does not care. If I say, do you want to pay for this with your own money? He'll go, okay. I really have to keep him in check because it's not necessarily that he wants more things than his other siblings. It's more of a matter of he's not necessarily worried about where the money's going to come from next. How soon is his birthday coming up? Or how many chores is he going to have to do to replenish the money, the little bit of cash that is in his wallet, okay? My older son, Elijah, he's more of a saver. And by that, I mean he really likes to think about his purchases. He wants to make sure, I talked about him in the Rubik's Cube, if you remember a couple weeks ago, he wants to make sure, is this the right Rubik's Cube, Like, does this one have stickers or does it have already the right colors or how many, I don't know. And there's a whole world of Rubik's Cubes that I don't understand, okay? But he really likes to think about his purchases. And a lot of times when we're out, if he asks for something and I'm trying to gauge if he really wants it or not, he'll ask me, well, will you pay half? Because he's really trying to make sure that money is always in his wallet. And so he's more of a saver. And I even remember from a very young age, I loved shopping. And of course, it wasn't necessarily about shopping for myself, although that would be the ideal when my mother would take me to go get a new pair of shoes or something. I just loved buying things, I loved grocery shopping with my mom. I loved picking out a birthday present for somebody. And I was that kid that I always owed my siblings and my parents money because whenever I was out, there was always something that I needed right then and there. Being a spender or a saver, it's neither a good thing or a bad thing, okay? But there are two sides to both of them. There are positives and negatives to both of them. So, spenders, I'll talk about them first because I understand spenders a lot better than I understand savers. But they're often very generous people. They're giving and they're spontaneous and they're fun to be around. But the flip side of that is they have to learn responsibility so that they don't get into trouble, get into debt, spend money that they don't have. A great verse for a spender is 1 Timothy 6:17. It says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, okay? That's a spender's life verse. God, he gives us money so that we can enjoy life. Well, I mean, sort of. But savers, on the other hand, are frugal. They're conscientious. They're ready when an emergency comes. They're the person that the spender is going to go to when they get in trouble, right? But the other side of them is that they have to learn how to be generous a lot of times. And they have to learn how to enjoy some of the fruits of their labor. A great verse that would represent the savers is Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent certainly lead to profit, but anyone who is reckless certainly becomes poor. So the key to this is to know who you are, which one you are, and which one your spouse is, so that you can begin to set some common goals, so that you can find some common ground. Remember, we're working toward that one flesh mentality, becoming one spirit, having one mind. And that requires a lot of growth and a lot of change and a lot of compromise, okay? So it's important to be able to have some conversations with your spouse that are over a date, a casual dinner, that aren't stemming from an argument, but just some conversations about what's important to you, what's important to me, what's important to us as a couple. So for my husband and I, early on, we had to establish some things that were important to us. I remember one specific conversation that we had, again, casual conversation. We were actually both in our bathroom getting ready, and our bathroom was tiny. I mean, like about the size of this table was the amount of space that you had to move around in. And I specifically remember being in the bathroom, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but my husband said, hey, let's make a pact right here, right now, that we're never going to have any consumer debt, that we're going to live a life free of credit card consumer debt. And I was like, yeah, cool. All all right, because I was not necessarily had that as a goal for myself, but I saw how important it was to him. And I thought, yeah, that's a good thing. We can work towards that. We can always have that as a goal for us, that we don't want to have consumer debt. But we obviously didn't stop there. Another thing that was of core value for us as a couple was that we wanted to be able to be generous towards our church and towards others in need. And so in order to accomplish that goal, we had to be able to plan and strategically have money set aside so that when we saw a need come up, we were able to be generous. 2 Corinthians 8:7 says, just a short little verse, but it says, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. That was important to us. We wanted to be a giving couple. Another thing that was important to us, now this one was a little bit more of a compromise, but we decided that experiences were more important to us than stuff. Now, I'm a shoes girl, okay? And so I love a new pair of shoes, but I had to realize that experiences, to be able to save toward a vacation, go on a trip with my spouse, make memories, shoes are not really memory making things to spend your money on. So for us, it was about valuing experiences over objects. And for me, I had to kind of come alongside and agree with my husband and kind of let him show me how important experiences were to us. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't save for a new sofa. We did. But first, we saved for a vacation that was important to us. And then maybe it took us a couple of years to save up for when we were able to buy, a new sofa. Different couples have different values. I remember I worked with a girl one time, and she told me, she said, well, my husband and I, we both work full-time jobs because we want to drive nice cars, and we love our four-wheelers. And so, that wasn't necessarily a goal of mine, but at least they were working toward a common goal. It's all about knowing your spouse and knowing what's important to him and expressing what's important to you and coming together and saying, okay, these are our values. How can we make this work? Some couples are saving up for a new home, or maybe a piece of property, or a new vehicle. It's all about having these conversations, dreaming together, and unifying your goals as a couple. You have to have these conversations so that you can be on the same page, moving in the same direction, so that you're not always fighting over what's important. Right. Becoming one flesh means what's important to him is important to me, and vice versa. It means that we're learning to work together. Are we perfect at this? No, but are we growing in this? Yes, okay? I want to close today by giving you a few areas to think about where you may be sending your husband some mixed messages. I think as women, a lot of times we send mixed messages without even realizing it, okay? So here's a mixed message that you may be sending in the area of finances. I want you to take the responsibility of paying the bills. This is too stressful for me, and I really want you to just take this responsibility off of me. So you say that, and then a couple days later, you're looking over his shoulder, and you're like, "Did you pay the water bill? Did you pay the power bill? Did you pay and you're making him feel like you want him to take on this responsibility, but you don't necessarily trust that he can. Okay? Here's another mixed message that you may be sending. Honey, I want you to be home more. And then maybe a couple days later, you say something like, I wish we could afford new carpet. This carpet is so disgusting, okay? Mixed messages. I want you to be home more is the opposite of we need more money. I need you to work more so that we can have more money. And a little soapbox of mine while we're on the topic of, honey, I want you to be home more. I want to share with you one of the most helpful things that I ever heard about this topic, because I think a lot of women really struggle with feeling like when their husband is working long hours and staying late, we take it personally and we think, well, he just must not want to be with me, or he just must value his work more than he values his family. I heard it said one time, long hours equals love. And it kind of goes back to that idea of assuming the best about our husbands. And I know that there are obviously extreme situations where there are men who are workaholics, but for the most part, A man is working hard. He wants to do a good job at his job because he's providing for his family. And he's not just providing for his family today, but he wants to do a good job so he can get a promotion or so that he can keep his job. He's working hard because he loves you. Long hours equals love. So the next time that your husband comes home late, try to remember that. Write that up in the corner of your notes. I know it's not exactly what we're talking about, but remember, long hours equals love. And we don't want to send these mixed messages to our husband of, I want you to be home more, but I want to have a bigger house. Here's another one. Honey, I really do want to get out of debt. And then a couple of days later, you may say, well, Nordstrom was having their anniversary sale, so I just got a few things, okay? Mixed messages. What are you saying to your husband in the area of finances? So 3 areas, as I close, where you may be sending some mixed messages. And they're all kind of I'm gonna bring some things back that we've been talking about. But how about, let's talk about first the area of respect. Okay? How are you communicating respect in the area of your finances? If he's a saver, do you respect the budget? Okay? Remember how we talked about getting to the root of an argument. Maybe you're arguing about a credit card bill and where the money's gonna come from to pay this credit card bill. But truly what he might really be upset about is the fact that you have not honored the budget that you set for that month. Okay? It's an area of respect. It's not necessarily an area as much about money as it is about respect. If he's a spender, then do you make him feel bad? Okay? So maybe you have an argument because your husband comes home with a brand new TV and you feel frustrated because that wasn't on your priority list anywhere. But he feels like you're saying, you don't know what we can afford as a family, and you're ruining our family plan by bringing home this new television. What are you saying to him in the area of respect about your finances? Here's the second one, teamwork. Are you a team player? Would your husband describe you as a team player in the area of finances? Or might he say that he feels like you're always working against him in this area? This is something that my husband and I had to have conversations about a lot because he would say, Holly, I feel like I'm working really hard to provide and to save and to put money in our retirement. And sometimes I feel like you're spending money as fast as I can bring it in. Does he feel like you're working with him, that you're a team, that you're keeping the budget that you set, that you're tracking your spending? This was a big one for me. And do you even know how much you're spending every month? Because this is a hard thing for women because we are the primary people who are bringing the food into the house and buying the toothpaste and the diapers and you're going on vacation, so you need sunscreen and towels but are you able to even generalize how much you spend on groceries every month and how much you spend on clothing and how much you spend on entertainment? Or do you even know how much your water bill is? Even if you're not the one that pays the bills, for if you're working as a team, it's important to just know. Because a lot of times, if you know the big picture, if you understand how much money is going out, then you're a little bit more cautious when you're making purchases, when you're buying diapers at Target and you see a new color nail polish that you need, okay? You'll have those things on your mind more if you're tracking your spending, if you're paying bills on time, if you're even just aware of what your monthly expenses are. Are you working towards accomplishing the dreams that you have as a couple? Or are you just kind of going through life, just spending money because, he needed a new pair of shoes, so I went and bought him one without even thinking about, was this the right time to make that purchase? Proverbs has so many great verses about wisdom in the area of finances. This one, Proverbs 3:3, I love talking about teamwork because it says, never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. And even though this is not necessarily talking about money, it is talking about teamwork. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you in the area of your marriage. Would your husband be able to say, my wife, she's faithful to the goals and the dreams that we have together as a couple? And here's the last one. What are you saying in the area of contentment? At the beginning of this message, I told you that one of the things that your husband wants to provide is for your happiness. Now, again, this is a strange concept because I just want to look at my husband and be like, what does my happiness have to do necessarily with you? You don't need to feel responsible for my happiness, but he does, okay? Think back to the concept about when we talked about you're the mood setter in your home. It's sort of the same idea. If your husband doesn't feel like you are satisfied with your life, he feels like he's failed you. Now, whether or not that's his fault, that's neither here nor there. If he feels like you're not happy, he feels like it's something he hasn't done right. And a lot of times as women, sometimes this is a small miscommunication, okay? Because you may generally feel happy about your life, but you walk around the house talking about one day when, one day when we can afford a bigger house, or one day when we can afford a new sofa, a new car, remodel our kitchen, one day when we're out of debt. You're communicating to him with your one day wins that you're not happy today. And he's thinking, man, I'm such a failure. I can't provide that one day win now. And she's not happy. And we're going to actually spend a good bit of time in this week's homework talking about contentment because it's a huge issue for women. We're going to talk about how the enemy of contentment is comparison. And we're going to talk about how contentment is a heart issue. It's not a financial goal. It's not an end result that you're going to get to. We're going to dive really deep into this topic of contentment. And I want you to really start thinking, am I content and am I communicating contentment to my husband? So I want to leave you with the words of Paul back in my favorite book of the Bible, Philippians chapter 4, and he says this, chapter 4, verse 11. Paul says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. The secret to being content can be learned. It's all about the situation that you're in and learning to be content where I am right now in this moment today with the money that I make, with the money that we have coming in, with whatever it is that I have. I can learn to be content. And Paul says, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Go in the strength of the Lord this week. Grow in the strength of the Lord this week. We're almost done, but there's still some work to do. So I will see you back here next week. You're going to love Melissa's story this week. She says this, I just wanted to take some time to thank you, Holly. Mrs Betterhalf has saved our marriage when I really had no idea it needed saving. Recently on a date night, my husband was quieter than normal and I could tell he was upset. He's been busy with purchasing our first home and I asked him how he was doing. To my surprise, he said he was feeling very sad and alone. He said that he'd been so excited about buying me a beautiful home and all he was hearing me say about the house is everything we need to fix. I will never forget what my husband said next. He said, it's killing me inside. Don't you see? He asked. I'm working so hard even on my day off so I can give you and the kids the best. I'm doing all of this for you guys. I had been picking out every flaw instead of celebrating this milestone for our family. Holly, when you shared about how providing and taking care of his family is the core of a man's being, I had just seen that firsthand. When I thought my husband was working because he simply liked being productive, and you said long hours equals love, it shifted my perspective. I'm really trying to never complain about what we do or do not have, but to live with a grateful heart and perspective. To know that my complaining kills my husband inside is a motivator to stay grateful and to believe the best in him. What a revelation. Thank you. Remember, this week, we are on the lookout for any mixed messages we may be unintentionally sending our husbands in the area of our finances. I'm so happy for Melissa's realization of how her words were deeply affecting her husband. And I'm praying that the Lord would open all of our eyes this week to areas where we can make a change too.